Arizona Territory, 1881. The sun was hanging low when the woman came running out of the cottonwoods, breath ragged, skirts torn at the hem, one boot missing. Behind her, pounding across the dry riverbed, came a man with a length of rope swinging from his hand, dust curling up with every step he took. The cowboy was riding west along the edge of the arroyo when he saw her. He did not think. He turned his horse sharp, heels into the gelding sides, and charged down the slope. The woman stumbled as she reached open ground. Her eyes caught the horse and rider bearing toward her, wide and wild with fear. The man with the rope slowed, startled, then tried to pull a pistol from his belt. The cowboy fired once. The bullet kicked dirt at the man's feet. His horse screamed as it reared, but the cowboy did not stop. He rode straight between them, grabbed the woman's waist with one arm, and hauled her up behind him in a single hard motion. She clung to his shirt, choking on air. He never looked back. They rode until the sun was gone and the first stars were out. The land spread wide and empty around them, low hills, dry grass, and the scent of creosote thick from a storm that had passed the night before. When the cowboy finally slowed, the woman's face was pressed against his shoulder. Her fingers were locked in the fabric of his coat like she did not know how to let go. He stopped near a cluster of boulders and dismounted, then helped her down gently. "You hurt?" he asked, voice low and even. She shook her head, but her knees gave out the moment her boots touched ground. He caught her, steadying her with both hands. "I am all right," she said, breathless. Just tired," he nodded once. "Name's Vance Jasper," he said. "You got one." She looked up at him, her face streaked with dust but her eyes still sharp. "Faye Truett," she said. "Thank you. I did not think anyone was coming." Vance led his horse to a flat spot and began unpacking his bedroll. Faye followed him, slow and stiff, watching his hands as they moved with practiced calm. He built a fire. She sat across from it, arms wrapped around herself, lips pressed tight like she was holding something in. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked once the flames took. She hesitated. "Then, that man, he used to work for my father. He wanted to marry me when I said no. He said I owed him something for wasting his time. He came to the house with a rope and a wagon, said he was going to take me where I could not say no anymore." Vance's jaw tensed, but he only nodded. "I ran," she said. "I ran and did not stop until you came." Vance stared into the fire. "You got people looking for you," her face twisted. "No, my father died last winter, no brothers, no cousins close. It is just me now." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a tin of beans, then handed it to her. "Eat, you need it." She took the tin and the spoon he offered, her fingers brushing his. They were cold. They slept near the fire. Vance gave her his blanket and slept in his coat, his rifle across his lap. She did not sleep much. He could hear her breathing change, sharp and uneven, every time an owl called or the wind shifted. In the morning, she helped him pack. "Where are we going?" she asked. "North," he said. "There is a town called Miller's Crossing. Sheriff there is fair. You tell him what happened. He will make sure that man does not come after you again." Faye looked down at her hands. "And after that," Vance looked at her for a long moment. "That is up to you." They rode side by side through the hills, the sun hot on their backs. Faye's silence was different now, not fear, but thought. Her shoulders were straighter. Her eyes searched the horizon, not the ground. By midday, they reached a shallow stream. Vance let the horse drink. Faye knelt beside it, splashing water on her face. When she looked up, droplets clung to her lashes. "You always ride alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Easier that way," she studied him. "But lonely," he met her eyes. "Sometimes." They made camp earlier that night, tucked against a red rock bluff. Vance cooked coffee while Faye sat with her knees pulled close, watching the firelight shift across his face. "My mother died when I was 10, she said. "My father did what he could, but he never knew how to raise a girl." Vance poured her a cup. "He did well enough." "You got away," she smiled faintly. "With your help." He did not say anything, just handed her the cup, their fingers brushing again. She held his gaze longer this time. "I do not know where I am going," she said. "Not really. You do not have to yet," he said. "You are safe now," her eyes softened. "I feel that." She lay down closer to him that night, just a little. When the wind picked up, he shifted his coat over her shoulders. She did not pull away. The next day, they reached Miller's Crossing just after noon. Vance rode straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Milner listened as Faye explained, her voice steady. He asked questions, wrote down her answers, promised to send a deputy to track down the man who chased her. When it was done, Faye stood beside Vance outside the office, blinking in the bright light. "You could stay here," he said. "There are good folks in this town." She looked around. "Yes, but that is not where you are going." "No," he said. She looked at him then, long and quiet. "I do not want to stay if you are not staying." Vance opened his mouth, closed it, then stepped closer. "You sure?" She nodded. "You rode between me and a man with a rope. You did not ask who I was or what I had done. You just helped me." His voice dropped. "I would do it again." "I know," she said softly. They rode out together the next morning, heading north again. No plan, no destination, just space ahead and something steady building between them. That night, when they made camp, Faye reached for his hand. He let her take it. And for the first time, he smiled. The land changed as they rode, flattened out some, with scattered juniper and mesquite standing like watchmen in the dust. Vance didn't say much. Faye didn't seem to need him to. They kept a steady pace, the kind that didn't wear a horse too thin, but still put miles behind them. By the third evening, they found a windmill in the distance turning slow against the sky. The tank below it held enough water for the gelding to drink deep. Behind it, a limestone ridge threw long shadows across the hardpan. "Looks like somebody's line camp," Vance said, glancing at the empty corral and the lean-to shed with its door hanging crooked. Faye dismounted, stretching her legs. "Think they'll mind if we borrow the shade for the night? If they mind, they ain't here to say so." He led the horse under the overhang, gave it oats from the saddle pouch, then walked the perimeter once, eyes scanning for sign. No boot prints but theirs, no smoke. Just wind and silence and the clatter of dry leaves in the breeze. Faye sat on the edge of a sawn log, pulling a thorn from her skirt. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "Back when," she stopped herself. "Texas Rangers," he said. "Did a stretch with them before that." "Just necessity." She nodded, quiet a moment. "You ever think about going back east?" "Not once." She looked at him sideways. "So you like it out here?" "It's not about like, it's what fits." Her fingers worked at another tear along her hem, slow and deliberate. "My mother was born in Virginia. Always talked about green hills and rain every week. I used to picture it like a painting. She never went back." "Some folks don't," Vance said. "Some folks stop looking behind once they cross the line." "Did you?" He didn't answer right away. "I stopped writing to anyone." "That's close enough." Night came gentle, without drama. They ate bread and salt pork, and he passed her a slice of dried apple from his pocket. She chewed in silence, her eyes on the stars beginning to spark above the ridge. "You think that man's still looking for me?" she asked, her voice low. "Maybe," Vance said, "but he won't find you." She leaned against her saddle, legs drawn up beneath her. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't come through that arroyo." "But I did." She turned her face toward him. "Why?" He looked out past the windmill. "Because I could. That's simple." It was that clear. Faye's gaze held on him a moment longer. Then she lay back, one hand beneath her head. "You don't talk like most men I've known." "I don't know what most men you've known were like." Loud, quick to anger. Slower to listen. Vance settled beside the fire, arms folded across his chest. "I've had enough of loud." The fire popped and a coyote called from somewhere far off. Faye's eyes were closed, but she wasn't asleep. Her breathing was too careful. "I used to think I'd marry a man with land," she said. "A house already built, fences, a barn, maybe even a milk cow, someone who could offer something solid." Vance waited. "But none of that ever felt right. And now I think I'd rather have something honest than solid." He didn't move, didn't speak. "I don't know where this trail ends," she said, "but I want to ride it all the way." He turned his head and met her eyes, open now and watching him through the firelight. "You already are," he said. She reached toward him, her fingers brushing the back of his hand with a kind of quiet certainty. He let her take it, and they sat like that until the windmill slowed to stillness and sleep took them both without hurry. In the morning, the sky was pale with early light. Vance saddled the gelding while Faye twisted her hair into a knot and tied it with a strip of cloth torn from her old petticoat. She didn't speak, but her movements were sure, like she'd found her rhythm again. As they rode out, she glanced back once at the windmill, then forward toward the horizon. I think I might want to learn how to shoot, she said. Vance gave her a sidelong glance. You saying that like a question? No, I'm saying it like I mean it, he nodded. Then we'll stop in the next town. I'll find you a proper revolver. She smiled, not soft, not shy, steady. And Vance felt it then, as clear as the morning sun. She wasn't riding behind him anymore. She was riding beside him. 2 weeks north of Miller's Crossing, the land turned sharp and red, with canyon walls rising like rusted teeth along the horizon. The trail narrowed near a dry wash, and the sun dropped fast behind the cliffs, leaving a chill that settled into their coats. They'd passed only 2 wagons in 3 days, both heading south. One had a broken wheel and a man cursing it, his wife folding her arms like she'd warned him about it weeks ago. The other was a preacher with a crate of hymnals and a mule that looked ready to collapse. Faye had waved to him. Vance hadn't. They made camp that night on a rock shelf with a view of the valley below. Faye pulled off her boots and stretched her legs out toward the fire. Vance crouched beside a tin of boiling water, stirring coffee grounds with his knife. You ever think about staying in one place? She asked, watching the sky darken to indigo. He poured the coffee into their tin cups. I've thought about it. Doesn't stick. Why not? Never had reason. She took a sip, then held the cup between both palms. What if you did? Vance didn't lift his eyes. Would depend on the place. And the people. He glanced at her then. She was leaning back on one elbow, her braid loose against her shoulder, the firelight catching in her hair. That too, he said. They sat quiet a while after that. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of juniper and cold stone. Somewhere below, an animal moved through grass too soft for a deer, too heavy for a rabbit. Faye tilted her head. There's someone down in that valley. Vance stood, unslinging his rifle. You certain? 2 men, one's limping. They're coming slow. He stepped forward, peering into the dark. A moment later, the shapes emerged, one tall, walking ahead, the other hunched to one side, clutching something tight to his chest. Hold up, Vance called. You're crossing into our camp. The tall man raised both hands. Ain't looking for trouble. My brother's been shot. We just need water. Vance stepped forward, rifle lowered but ready. Faye rose and followed, staying behind his shoulder. The wounded man sagged against a boulder. His shirt was soaked through on one side, and he gritted his teeth against the pain. Caught a bullet 2 days back, he muttered. Didn't see the bastard behind the mesquite. Where were you headed? Vance asked. Granite Ridge. Heard there was a mining outfit hiring guards. Vance looked at Faye. She gave a small nod. Bring him over, Vance said. We've got coffee. Fire'll help. They sat the man close to the flames, and Faye took a clean rag from her satchel, soaked it in warm water, and pressed it to the wound. You're lucky, she said. It went through but didn't hit anything that won't heal, the man groaned. Feels like it took my whole damn side. You'll live, she said, not unkindly. The brothers stayed till morning. Vance gave them a strip of jerky and pointed them toward the nearest creek. They left with thanks and a promise to pay it forward. Once they were gone, Faye sat back down by the fire and pulled her coat tighter. You didn't ask what side they fought on, she said. No need, Vance replied. Blood's the same color either way. She gave a quiet laugh. You're not what I expected. Vance raised a brow. What did you expect? Someone who'd save me, then disappear. He didn't answer. I don't want you to disappear, she added. He looked at her then, long enough that she felt it in her chest. You won't lose me, he said. They broke camp and rode out, the cliffs behind them glowing pink in the morning light. By mid-afternoon, they came to a town barely more than a rail stop. A telegraph office, a dry goods store, and a saloon with a roof patched in 4 places. Vance tied the gelding outside the store while Faye stepped inside. She came out with a revolver in a leather holster, still wrapped in brown paper. You sure? He asked. She nodded. It's time I carried something of my own. They didn't stay the night. The town had a smell to it, old beer and sweat and something sour under the boards. They camped in a grove of cottonwood trees near a shallow creek, the water running cold and clear. That evening, Faye practiced loading and unloading the revolver. Her hands were steady. Vance watched from a few paces off, saying nothing. Afterward, she sat beside him near the fire, her knees drawn up beneath her skirt. I used to think I had to be grateful for whatever kindness came my way, she said, even if it came with strings. You don't owe anybody anything, Vance said. I know that now, she turned toward him, but I still want to give something back to someone who didn't ask for anything. Vance looked into the fire, his jaw tight. I don't need anything from you, he said quietly. I know. She reached out, touching his sleeve. That's why I want to stay. He turned to her and for the first time let his hand settle over hers without hesitation. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the dark. Vance leaned close, his voice low, rough with something he hadn't let out before. You ride where I ride, Faye. That's how it is from here on. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The wind picked up out of the north 2 days later, carrying with it the scent of pine and snowmelt. They'd climbed steadily into higher ground, the red dust giving way to granite and the hard green of pinyon. Vance knew this country knew the way the air thinned and the light turned sharper the farther you rode into it. Faye didn't complain, but he saw her shift in the saddle more than once, legs sore from the climb. They paused at a ridge where the land broke open into a shallow basin, dotted with low cabins and a sawmill that turned slow with the wind. The place was called Caldera Hollow, a settlement tucked between forest and cliff, the kind of town that didn't ask questions if you came in quiet and left the same. We'll stay a while, Vance said, eyes on the smoke curling from the chimneys. You could rest up. Maybe take on some sewing if that suits you. I've done worse for less, she said, but I was thinking something steadier. Maybe the cookhouse could use help. He gave a small nod. You speak to Josie McKean. She runs the boarding house. Knows everyone worth knowing. They rode down into the hollow as the sky turned silver with dusk. The air smelled of wood smoke and lye soap. Faye slid from the saddle without waiting, her boots crunching on gravel. She didn't look back at him. Just walked straight to the low building with the porch sagging in the middle and knocked on the door. Vance waited beside the horse, watching her figure in the lantern light. She moved like someone who'd made up her mind. He found a stall for the gelding, rubbed him down, then stepped into the saloon to ask after work. The barkeep remembered him from a winter past, when Vance had ridden through trailing a claim jumper with a hole in his shoulder. Still quiet with a rifle, the man asked. Still quiet, Vance said. He was offered a bunk in the livery attic, meals in trade for a few nights of patrol. It suited him. He didn't need much. Faye came to find him at the barn near dark. She's letting me help in the kitchen, she said, brushing stray flour from her skirt. There's a girl there named Alma who's due to marry come spring. I'm to take over when she goes. Good, he said. She asked if I had anyone to vouch for me. I told her you were close by. He leaned on the stall door, arms folded. That's so, she said. I had a look about me. Like someone who'd seen too much to be just passing through, Vance didn't speak. I didn't tell her anything more, didn't feel like I had to. You didn't. They stood there a moment, the quiet between them easy now. She looked at him, eyes steady. Do you ever think about settling somewhere like this? Not just staying a while, I mean planting your boots and calling it done. He watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the wind cold enough to turn her cheeks pink. I've thought on it, he said. But never had a reason to stop moving. Her gaze didn't shift. And now, he looked out toward the darkened road. A lantern flickered in the boarding house window. I reckon I've found one. She didn't smile, just stepped close enough for her coat to touch his. I don't want to be someone passing through either, she said. Not anymore. Vance reached for her hand, rough fingers closing over hers, and she didn't pull back. They stayed in Caldera Hollow through the rest of the winter. Snow came in fits, never heavy enough to bury the world, just enough to slow it down. Faye worked mornings in the kitchen and evenings mending shirts for the mill hands. Vance cleared brush from the road, hauled firewood, stood watch when tempers flared at the saloon. They slept in separate rooms, but the space between them narrowed with each day. It was in small things how she brought him coffee before sunrise, how he left a carved button on her work table without a word. No declarations, just the work of making room for one another. Come March, the sawmill laid off 2 men and Vance was offered their place. He turned it down. I've spent my life chasing things down, he told her one night as they walked the ridge above the town. I'd rather spend the next part building something. With me, she asked. He nodded once. If you'll have me. She took his arm, laced hers through it like it belonged there. I already do. Faye and Vance were married the following Sunday under the junipers behind the boarding house. Josie McKean strung white calico between the trees, and Alma baked 2 pies, peach and apple, because she said it was wrong to choose just one. They didn't write to anyone about it. There was no one left to write to. But as the sun set behind the basin and the wind carried the scent of pine through the trees, Faye looked at Vance and saw not the man who rescued her, but the one who stayed. And Vance, standing beside her with his hands rough and sure, knew he'd found the only place he'd ever meant to be. Spring settled into Caldera Hollow with the kind of quiet certainty that felt earned. Snow still lingered in the shadows between rocks, but the days lengthened, and the cottonwoods along the creek began to show the first tender signs of green. Vance sanded the last of the pine planks, stacked outside the new lean-to he'd been building behind the livery. The boards would line the walls of the small house going up beside the pasture fence, a simple, square structure with a stone stove already bricked in by hand, and a porch deep enough to sit under when the rains came. He had laid the foundation himself, but Faye had chosen the direction it faced. "I want the morning sun in the kitchen," she'd said, turning her face toward the east. "I like to begin the day with light." She spent her afternoons helping Josie prepare meals for the men who came off the trail hungry and too tired to speak. But her mornings were her own now, and she used them beside Vance hauling buckets of lime wash, fitting shutters, tying her apron with the same focus she once used to mend seams. One morning she stood back from the doorway, her hands smudged with lime, and said, "When it's done, I want to plant a garden, not for show, for food, beans, squash, maybe some carrots." He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "You'll need a fence. Elk'll eat the whole thing otherwise. I figured you'd build one." "I figured I would too." She smiled then, not the shy kind but the kind that came from knowing something would last. He married her with a ring carved from the antler tip of a mule deer he'd brought down clean the winter before. She wore it without ceremony, without fuss, like something she'd been meant to wear all along. They said their vows in the parlor of the boarding house, with Josie holding a Bible and the cook Alma crying softly into her apron. They moved into the house before the roof was even shingled. Vance strung canvas over the rafters until he could finish it. Faye called it their quilt of sky, and every night they lay beneath it listening to the crickets and the wind in the tall grass. She took to the land like she'd been born to it. She traded sewing for a pair of gloves, and by midsummer the garden grew in neat rows, her hands calloused from work, her cheeks darkened by sun. Vance tilled the soil with a mule he bought from an old miner passing through, and when the rain came, they stood under the porch and watched it soak the earth until the dust turned to clay. One evening, she brought him a bowl of beans boiled with bacon and said, "I've been thinking about teaching some of the children how to read. There's a few who come to the kitchen with their older brothers. They don't go to school. There's no one to teach them." He looked up from the saddle he was mending, eyes steady. "You want to be that someone? I think I do. Then you should." And so she did. By fall, 3 boys and 1 girl came to sit on the porch twice a week, their bare feet swinging from the step as she showed them letters carved into scraps of wood. Vance built a bench when the porch got too crowded. He never said much while they learned, just worked close enough to listen, his hands busy with whatever the day required. The town changed slowly around them. A second boarding house went up near the creek. A stone chimney rose behind the new general store. Folks started calling the trail past their house Faye's Road, since it led to the garden, and most of the children had learned to count from the seed rows she marked with river stones. One night, as the first frost crept in and the fire inside their small house crackled low, Faye leaned against Vance's chest, her head tucked beneath his jaw. "I feel full," she said, "like my life has weight now. But not the kind that drags you down." He ran his hand along her back, slow and steady. "I used to think peace was something you waited for," she continued. "Now I think it's something you build one day at a time." Vance kissed her forehead, his voice low. "We built something good." She looked up at him, eyes soft with certainty. "And I want to stay in it, with you, no matter how long the road is." He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. They woke before dawn most days, their bodies warm beneath the quilt she'd sewn that spring. He'd rise first, stoke the fire, then bring her tea in the same tin cup she'd used the day he first offered it to her. She'd stand by the window while the sky brightened, and he'd watch her, never once forgetting the way she'd run toward him that first day, worn and breathless, but unbroken. Years passed like that. The porch aged. The garden stretched wider. The house grew by one room. The children she taught grew older and took over their father's trades, but they still stopped by to sit on the porch and ask after her beans or her stories. And every evening, without fail, Vance came home with dust on his boots and his eyes searching only for her. They lived long, and they lived close. No tragedy came to claim what they'd built. No sudden storm, no sickness they couldn't weather. Just season after season of quiet strength, of shared labor and deeper love. And when their hair turned silver and their hands grew slower, they still walked the same road together, fingers interlaced, hearts steady, and the world, at last, gentled around them. They had done more than survive. They had made a life.